Okay, so this is Jeff Lawrence speaking, and this is the August 9th meeting of the Harbor Management Commission's Mooring Committee. And so let's begin with our Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Call to order and Harbor Master's report.
Thank you. Could you folks on the phone hear me okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, excellent.
Yes, sir.
All right. So let you know, we've John and I went out and we conducted a mooring occupancy check, and all the boats are present and accounted for at their moorings, albeit not always the correct mooring, but they're within a boat length of the correct mooring, which is good. I've also gone out and now I have a complete log with documentation of all the docked vessels, and I'm not talking about Pequot docked vessels, which we've always had that from the club directly, but all the other docks in the harbor. We now, I sent letters or emails to everyone who had a dock, and now we know all of the vessels there and have their information. I've taken a look at Ye Yacht Yard, and I've reached out to Justin for those vessels. There was about a half dozen vessels as of a week or so ago that either did not have their current registration stickers, did not have a proper Ye Yacht Yard sticker, and one had no registration at all on it. So I reached out to him to contact the owners so that I told him to avoid getting a ticket from me or the Marine Police to have that straightened out, and he's coordinated with all of them to get their boats, the stickers on them where they belong, the one that's not registered, and get the current markings on them. Been out there the last few weekends whenever I can, at least once a day, sometimes 2 or 3 times. I've had some speed enforcement, and it's typically the visitors who do that I've had to stop and tell them to slow down. We had one boat going the wrong way again in the moorings, coming in, putting the moorings, going between the country club and the moorings for some reason, which I never understand how, especially if one looks at their GPS or a chart or whatever, but boats like to go that way and do that occasionally. We had one boat tied up incorrectly, so it was actually perpendicular to the channel. He had left such large scope on his lines that his boat, instead of being in parallel, was blocking half the channel. So it ended up being, I've determined, he tied it to the wrong mooring. He tied it to a mooring for a much smaller boat, which means the lines were longer, and he had a long boat. So once we got him in the right spot and adjusted, that was resolved. We had some boats, as usual, incorrectly tied that I catch that don't tie them to their mooring lines properly, or they're wrapped around a prop where it's going to get cut or twisted on an engine, so we'll kind of straighten that out. Talked to a bunch of fishermen and some kids out there as well. Very positive feedback on since you probably know, at our last Harbor Management Commission meeting, I presented information about whether we wanted the pier taken down by Public Works, the old fishing pier, and I think we were going to wait till August and discuss it again. Then I got a call the next day that it was gone because Public Works actually went out and took a look at what I was asking if they can do, and they decided, since we're here, we'll just do it. So they took the entire fishing pier down to solve the deck. The entire deck is down. And it looks good. And even at low tide, we still have, even at high tide, which we've had this week, the large pilings closest to the channel, you've got, I think, 4 or 6 of those are clearly visible. Even the short ones that were cut off where the piers used to be still stick out of the water a foot or so at high tide. So they're clearly visible. And no one would go on the inside of it anyways because it's so close to shore. At low tide, they're out much higher. And talking to the folks and in listening to the first night of Wednesday sailing when they were gone, I happened to be there with the dog watching all the vessels come in, and I can just hear them saying that eyesore's finally gone. And, I mean, everyone was like, "Great job, you guys took that down finally." It was very positive that it was missing. And talking to some of the fishermen, both kids and older folks, they liked it gone as well because it was just in the way. And a couple of kids had the best idea, these little 12 or 13-year-olds. They were saying, you've got a couple of high ones at both ends, high pilings. They said there's a section in the middle with 4 or 6 lower ones between the old one that had been gone already and the one that was just taken down. They said, could you take those down to the ground so when we're fishing, the lines don't get tangled up? We can kind of fish out better from that. And it was actually a good idea the kids had. Yeah. We have them sawed off and just carted away at a, low tide. It would take a chainsaw a minute to take each one down. Yeah. And that was actually a good idea that we should think about whether we want to do that.
But they were still able to cast out between the piers.
They were showing me what it was like. They said it was easier to cast. They said, but whenever there's a current, watch what happens, sir. And it goes into the thing and it gets tangled up. And they said if we had a bigger opening, that would be a little nicer. But they liked it. It was better to begin with, but it's still...
Well, I think Devin Shanta is going to chat with the regulators about taking down whether those lower support structures can be cut off. And so we should get that report from him at Tuesay's meeting.
That's good.
Is there a question also about how easy it would be to do
Put them in.
the rebuild if we cut them off? To understand that we're not causing us a bigger expense if we can.
He's going to chat with them about that.
So we've had
extraction of impacted teeth.
Yeah, so we've had fishermen at Yee Yacht Yard at both docks, as well as, fishing from the docks, which we typically don't allow. I've been letting them because I've watched them. There's nowhere else to fish. There's a lot of kids fishing. They're just trying to get on the water, and they're really good about the boats. They're not casting on the boats. They stop when boats go out and pulling the line. So, I'm giving some latitude because it's good they're fishing and they're enjoying it, and I get it. They can't fish from the fishing pier anymore. It's difficult there, so it's all worked out so far, so good. Signage, the sign is up. There's a small no swimming sign right where the entrance used to be to the lower wharf, the pier itself. We probably need another one heading over by the beach, because once you walk in by those rocks, if you head over to the beach, where most people do, you're not going to see the small sign, the other sign. There was just something in the paper last week, too, about Lake Mohegan and the enforcement there and people swimming and all the signage they've had to put up. So something the commission should probably think about as part of your increasing signage in that area, telling people what the rules are so they know. Kayakers have been out. We've been talking to them. They're staying out of the channel. They're trying to keep it, they're doing pretty good this year. They understand the rules once they've been talking to people, so they're not clogging up the middle. I did have I had no swimmers yet in the channel. I talked to some kids, and they were going out on a paddle board. I said, you're not going swimming? And they said, no, sir, that would be a terrible idea. I said, you listen to me. And they go, yes, sir, we do. But then again, a few weeks ago, there was about 12 kids, young people in the water. They had anchored off the end of the jetty, just on the beach club side of it, close to it, and they were all swimming back and forth from the jetty to their boat. So not exactly in the channel, but in the management area. So when I went out to the whaler to go chase them, they saw me coming and took off, and I can't catch them in the whaler. It's just way too small to do anything about it, to check their life jackets or registration or see if they've been drinking. I had no way of catching them. So they must have been up to something. As soon as they saw me coming, they took off pretty fast. So, and the other thing I wanted to comment on is I alluded to, some of you know already. I was out there at low tide this Saturday morning, actually about 15 minutes after low tide, and I just wanted to point out that at the Yee Yacht Yard, 9 boats were floating, 9 dinghies were floating. 19 were not, and they were sitting hard on the ground and wouldn't budge. And the 9 that were floating, some like even mine, all the way at the end in the middle, by floating, you can't put the engine in. You're talking about just an inch or two of water onto the boat, so it's just enough to not, if you don't put too much weight on it, you could probably get it out. So the entire middle section is filled in, basically, from the fireboat in. All the boats by the launching ramp were sitting dry. And on the other side, the first boat on the harbor side, where the string of whalers are, was sitting on the bottom, too. So it's something the commission should keep an eye on, think about long-term. What's plan B if this does silt in quicker? It's something to think about. I don't know what the answer is. It's expensive to dredge, I get it. But I don't,
Well, the dredging, there was the plan that was adopted by the commission and financed by the Connecticut Port Authority, I want to say 5 years ago, 6 years ago, to dredge that area. However, it was never going to be allowed to dredge from about halfway off the dinghy dock to the rocks. DEEP will not allow us to do that. The other part of the plan was to continue to dredge where the boat launching ramp is, because we have one section width of ramp that could be placed at the end of the boat launching ramp if it were dredged. If it's not dredged, the angle for that last piece of launch material is not appropriate. The decision was made by the commission, I want to say 2 years ago now, after consulting with Justin Cathcart at Parks and Rec about the boat launching ramp. The fact is that the boat launching ramp is only inaccessible about an hour before each tide, and that anybody who has a permit in Fairfield to use the boat launching ramp at Southport can also use the one at South Benson. So it's not like there are people who can't get out if they don't want to. The hour before and after low tide is problematic even when we don't have such extreme tides. But the real kick in the stomach was we had financing for the dredging. The real problem, and we had a contractor lined up to do the dredging, the problem was because of the composition of the material to be dredged, it had to be hauled away to central Long Island Sound, and it had to be capped. And it had to be capped with appropriate material from another dredging project in Long Island Sound. There have not been any dredging projects in Long Island Sound for years. So our permit expired. DEEP would not renew it because the boat launching ramp issue did not seem to be a big deal, and because it appeared that there were no opportunities to get any capping material for anything that we dredged, and because DEEP now would require us to renew the permit, would require us to spend at least $35,000 on testing, and in addition to whatever the costs from RACE or whoever else we contracted with to do the work to get the permit, it didn't seem like it was a good plan to keep kind of banging our heads against the wall. And so those events and that thinking led us to say, we've got to put that project on hold. It was never going to be the cure-all that we anticipated that it would be to begin with, and let's move our energies and what possible funding opportunities there might be over to the Lower Wharf side and take care of the wall that's crumbling and the docks that are falling apart. So that's kind of all of it in a nutshell. Yeah. For the record.
And we had talked about the possibility, since dredging in offshore cap solution was unlikely, that it's possible to remove it, dry it on land, and truck it to a distant place that would take the material. And that we guessed that residents would not like the drying activities going on right there on Harbor Road, or it's Harbor Road, and that would be very expensive to truck that material away. It's not a huge volume of material; it'd still be expensive
because it's contaminated, right?
Right. So we have to find a place that would take the contaminated material. So, and at the end of the day, we really pick up in terms of space for all the money spent on that. So it is possible. It is possible to remove it. It could be done if we got the permit, but at significant expense and limited additional deep water there. So we left it alone.
So we have to just think outside a little bit. I mean, there's options. If it gets worse, maybe it's talking to the town and having them reallocate specific spaces for specific boats. So if people can't get their whalers out, put them on the metal dock, get those boats with their shallower draft, maybe move some of them to yacht yard side to the double docks by the ramp. Maybe it's looking at Perry Green and moving some boats there, reallocating some of that space. You know, the club has what they call a whaler dock there. Maybe it's moving some whalers there, or some of the boats there off the green. I know you have to walk from your yacht yard down the street, but just coming up with ideas.
Yeah.
So would they allow that? Would the yacht club allow that?
What's that?
Would they allow that, the yacht club?
Well, no, and not taking their dock, but adding whalers to off of Perry Green, because that's ours. That's either rec department or they have a few, and then we manage the rest of those moorings. So that's perhaps another option as well.
People to get spots on that dock, are they warned ahead of time that there's going to be a significant amount of time when they're not going to be able to use their boat? They don't get a warning.
They figure it out.
They figure it out. Okay.
Yeah. I think people have
We
come,
haven't had a lot of complaints, though. I mean,
No.
the people accept it as those are the natural conditions.
Yeah.
so they'll say, when are we gonna dredge here, but not
Right, but it's not a
not a
lot.
hostile complaint,
Right,
no.
right.
No, which is interesting, but I think it's getting worse, and I just wanted to throw it out that we probably should just have that on our radar of something at some point we're gonna have to look at. Other than that, everything is well. Everything is it's all good in the harbor. Things are good.
Okay, new business. I just have one thing I want to bring up, new business. I just wonder how necessary it is for us to have these subcommittee meetings every month, because the Harbor Master report seems to be the centerpiece right now, and we're going to have a Harbor Master report at the Harbor Commission meeting, and it seems a little redundant, so I wanted to feedback to whether we really have to do this every month, but.
Well, I agree with you, and especially during the summer.
Right.
Yes.
Pretty redundant, but there have been times when we've had significant issues about moorings and mooring applications. Certainly when we we revised the rules.
Right.
We were meeting every 2 weeks, every week. So you're right. I mean, it's not always necessary, but certainly there are times when once a month it's almost not enough. So.
Okay. Well, would it be okay if I kind of felt people out ahead of time and see if there's a significant business, and then if not, we can.
Absolutely, I think
we can have a line item on the Harbor Commission meeting of subcommittee more, where plus, Brian's report is going to be very similar at the.
It's going to be identical. I try to make my report longer here because my mooring report will just say they're all occupied and accounted for, and everything is fine, done.
Right.
So I talked a little more just to.
The purpose of this committee is to be a place where if the harbor master has issues, those issues can be resolved.
Right.
Because the full commission may not have the interest, expertise, opportunity to examine the issues in the kind of depth that they need. But certainly, recently we haven't had those issues have not arisen.
Right. So probably the busiest times are when new mooring applications are coming in, and so
they come in all the time. I get them every week. I'll get every week. They constantly come in, and they're just reviewed, accepted, put on the list.
An example would be somebody who comes into the mooring waiting list and asserts riparian rights, and there's a question about looking at our rules about whether they are really eligible to be treated that way.
Okay.
The harbor master may not want to interpret our rules alone and have the committee weigh in on that, because that would be putting everybody else back on the waiting list by a spot by putting that person at the top of the list. Same thing for somebody asserting commercial fishermen rights. Suddenly they become a commercial fisherman. Do they go on the top of the list for the next mooring? And so our rules say if they really are, then that's what he should be doing. So.
Okay.
We have one now, for instance. I got in just last week, and we had the $60. I clicked approve. I went to double check the list. He's number one. I'm like, why is he number one? Then I dove into his application. He's claiming riparian rights. I looked at his address. It's nowhere near the water. So he checked off that he had riparian rights. So then I quickly disapproved him to put him back on the application pending list off of the waiting list. And I reached out to him. I said, what is the basis of your claim for riparian rights? Why do you claim that? Did you own property on the harbor and you have a different, he hasn't responded yet, and it's been a couple of days. Oh. So that's why this kind of stuff you have to watch.
Just testing you.
Yeah, see if I read them.
The system's been programmed to know our rules.
Yeah, it has.
It does things like that.
Then you have to, but I double check to see, make sure it puts you, every time I accept one, I go to the list and I go to the end to make sure the person was actually added to the list.
There's a house on Harbor Road that's just recently selling, so that's going to create a question about the vessel that's associated with that resident, and also the person who moves in wanting to get a mooring, I'm sure. So.
And there is a gentleman now, I'm working on figuring this out. He insists he's on the list and has been on the list, and he doesn't appear on the list, but he doesn't have a copy of the check or anything, and he just doesn't appear on my records anywhere as having submitted an application, but he believes he did. And so I have to try to find old records, whatever we have, and see if I can find him on any old record to see if he's correct or not. So we have boxes. which I'll let you know.
One thing you could do is just not have them pre-schedule, not to have them at certain times of the year.
Yeah.
And then if issues emerge, you
Yeah.
could schedule a meeting of the commission so that the members can plan ahead that there isn't going to be a meeting that month unless something comes up. So you could sort of default the other way around.
Right.
Rather than having to reach out to everybody every month to find out if you need to have a meeting or not. So.
Right, the beauty of having it every month is you can go to Jen Carpenter at the beginning of the year.
Get a whole
And you get the phone number, one phone number that'll go for every meeting and a room assignment.
Right.
So you can, it's easier to cancel sometimes than it is
Okay, well,
to call and
I
to,
think that's what, I think
It's
it's
your
not
call,
really that
but-
much trouble to feel people out to see if we really need a meeting, so I think I'd rather do it that way, just cancel if we,
If
Yeah,
it's not a meeting.
yeah.
yeah, okay.
So whether you get the room and the number and it's locked in for 12 months.
exactly.
Well, it's just like what happened today. She sent us a note
Right.
2 weeks ago. And asked
I just
us-
don't wanna also don't wanna monopolize a room if we don't have to, but, I
Right,
mean, I mean, if there's a demand for these rooms and people are getting shut out, then, okay.
But you're correct, the busiest time is usually in the renewal season,
Right,
and making decisions about who's going to get the
Right.
spots.
yeah.
okay, so, motion for adjournment?
Do you have public comment in this meeting?
Oh, public comment.
Oh, do we have any public comments?
An interesting meeting. Thank you to our harbor master for looking after our fishermen, and well done as on. Thank you very much, and good night, Paul.
Okay, thank you,
Hi,
Mr.
Pat, thank you.
I think Jeff.
Did Jeff have something?
Did Jeff have anything?
Did you have a comment?
No, sir, but thank you for the enjoyable meeting.
Jeff, this is Kim, just one aside. Do you have a bill for us, for the commission?
Yeah, we're working on that now. Travis is putting that together. You should have that in this month.
Great. Okay, super, thank you.
Thank you for your patience.
All right, motion for adjournment. Okay, and second, okay, meeting's adjourned.